How's everybody doing tonight? Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Late night with PBO. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. System communication, protection, family. Wind it on down. Again, give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Appreciate you, R. Appreciate you. Rhonda Runfield. Mildred. Glad you can join me. Regine in the house. Shout out to my man Herbert Wayne Warner, CISSP on my LinkedIn. Appreciate you for joining. You know how we do it. If you got any questions, cybersecurity or tech, just drop them in the box. Most of y'all know y'all can reach me on Discord. I'm usually in Simply Cyber or Study GRC. Shout out to Ty. Glad you can join me. Let's go ahead and get started with the late night with PBO. You see it, Systems Communication and Protection family. These are the 20 families. We're almost done. SC over here. Got 2 more left. So most people know I do NIST 800-53. That's my specialty. One of my favorite compliances. I probably will on a separate stream, but we can chop it up a little bit about it. We were discussing it on Discord this morning. A lot of people were crying for NVIDIA. I was like, I don't cry for $1 trillion companies, but yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, most definitely. So once again, though, I don't really do a lot with DeepSeek since I do federal compliance. That's a Chinese company, so I don't think they're gonna let us use it. We've been going to war with Chat GPTs, but we'll definitely get into it at the end time. But yeah, we since I do federal work, I probably check it out just for personal reasons, but from a job wise and kind of the area I specialize in, you know, the government don't let us use Chinese even look at Chinese software. Let's see, are you? Oh, yep. We'll talk about it at the end. We can definitely chop it up. But once again, you know, that federal space, let's usually do a lot with Chinese companies. But once again, we can chop it up at the end. We're not going over it. This is the system and communication protection. These are the sub families of that particular security family. They have 48 things and they skipped over a few, so it's probably 40 sub families. But we definitely won't not hitting all those. But um, since it's definitely one of the most, I would say, um, security families in there, you see a lot of cryptographic keys, cryptographic protection, public keys, mobile code. So you get a lot of platform independence, protection of information at rest. So we definitely hit on those though. But once again, we probably go over about 10 or 20 of those. I didn't want to get too crazy with it. And especially when you deal with high systems, supercritical systems, a lot of these definitely play a big part in there. Usage restriction, out of band channels. So, definitely one of the most technical security families in there. And we're touching some of that. We look at security architecture and kind of delve down in a couple checks that roll off into separation, isolation, once again, cryptographic, which is usually TLS, HTTPS, look a couple server 2020 checks looking at that encryption. So we're going to touch on that a little bit tonight. GRC, a lot of times we don't usually touch into that the tech sector as much as I want to, but let's see. Daniel's chat GPT for Gov today. I have to go check that out. I appreciate that. I haven't seen that. Shout out to Rondo Mondo, which I thought ChatGPT would get there because Microsoft has government data centers specifically for government. And they also have FedRAMP commercial centers. But I appreciate that, Rondo. I'm definitely gonna do a video on that because I didn't even see that. So appreciate that. That might be our next video, ChatGPT Gov. So let's start going through it. SC2 separations of systems and user functionality. Separate user functionality including user interface from system functionalities. System managed functionality includes functionality necessary for administering database, network, workstations. Cloud's going to be in there. These functions typically require privileged user access. The separation of user functions from system management is physical and logical. So the clearest one we talk about on that is doing work under your user account and doing work under your privilege account. So if you're a DBA or administrator, you would log in with your regular account. Then with Unix, you would sudo switch users to your privilege account as a DBA. I used to be a web admin and application admin. So I log on with my account and I would sudo when I wanted to do Tomcat type work, change config, start it up because it would start up under privilege accounts when you start up a Tomcat server. So obviously you have to use privilege, but we would separate them. Like I would do most of my regular job under my regular user account. And when I need to do web type work or app type work, I would switch users into my privilege account. So that's how we keep that system and user functionality. Like when I switched over to my web admin account, I couldn't do email or browse. So they believe if you browse a lot of times, you would get a virus. So once you switch users to your privilege account, you couldn't do user type functionality. So the big one back then was email and surfing the web. So that's how you would keep those separate. S3, security function isolation. Isolate security functions from non-security functions. Security functions are isolated from non-security functions by means of isolation boundaries within the system via partitioning domains. The isolated boundaries control access to protect integrity of hardware, software. The big one is here is firmware that provides security functions. A lot of times when you deal into Windows or especially Unix, they have a kernel on different threads, so those threads handle that for you by default. From then, when you create your own security functions, once again, you have to do that separation. So once again, our security functions will probably run under a privilege account. And to get under that privilege account, right, you will have to log into them. A lot of times we run them under GSAs, GSMAs on Windows accounts. And those security accounts will automatically change their password for a year. And they take care, once again, that separation for you. Information shared system resources. Prevent unauthorized and unattended information transfer via shared system resource. Information in the shared system also applies to encrypted representation of information. And under context, control of information is shared system resources referred to as object reuse and residual information. So a lot of times when you run software as a user, if you save stuff in memory, run stuff in a register, save stuff on a hard drive, especially in a web server, when another user comes on, they sharing that back end connections. So if you don't clear it out, once again, you will have unintended consequences. Like if I share my SSN and I don't clear it out, the next user in a web application is using that privileged account, and it will share information. So once again, you want to make sure your system's clearing it out, and your development team are actually nulling out those memory spaces. So once again, a lot of people don't realize that they're sharing information. A lot of times too, if you have a hard drive and you delete it, if a person reuse that hard drive, they can undelete or delete and get to that information, right? So once again, since it's a shared hard drive, you want to make sure you zero it out or purge it or something to make sure that that deleted information is actually deleted. So I see that a lot out there in the wild. Let's see. Trying to see if anybody out there be even in chat. Appreciate you, Rondo Mondo. Once again, definitely probably do a video on the Chat GPT Gov. Oh, that was today too. So cool. Definitely got to check that out. Denial of service. Events may occur due to a variety of internal and external causes, such as an attacker by adversary, lack of planning or support, organizational needs with respect to capacity and bandwidth. Such attacks can occur across a wide range of network protocols. So you have external denial of service attacks, then you have internal service attacks. A lot of times they're by accident. When I was a programmer, some programmer got his program in a loop and it just took all the memory out of production and shut down the system, right? So that was actually internal denial of service attack. Once again, it was just something that wasn't very rarely tested. So, but most of the time, you get denial of service attack is people sending fake loads or fake attacks to your website to take it down, right? If you don't have this denial of service protection software, once again, you can do denial of service and take down your website. Resource availability. Priority protection prevents low priority processes from delay or interfering with system service with high priority process. Quotas prevent users of process from maintaining more than predetermined amount of resources, right? So a lot of times you have back-end jobs running in batch jobs. Once again, if they get in a loop or just start taking more memory, you don't want them to take down your production system. So a lot of times a process, you can say it can only use 20 megs of memory or this much disk space. So if a bad guy gets it or if a programmer makes a bad coding design we don't catch, that process will only use so much memory or so much disk space. So it won't take your service down. But a lot of times you don't see people putting quotas on processes and back-end jobs anymore. But once again, that'll help you with denial of service type attacks. Once again, only giving processes the amount of resources they would need to do their job. So something happens, right? It would only take itself down. Boundary protections, monitor and control communications at the external management interface systems, implement subnets for publicly accessible system components that are physically and logically separated from the internal network, connect external networks or systems only through managed interfaces consisting of boundaries. So a lot of times when you go in a corporation B, you will see a guest network and a production network, right? So your guest network is for the public, and they can only, get to what they should get to, help them serve, but you wouldn't let them to your back end production system, right? So that's where that boundary separation. And you see external networks and system only through managed interfaces. So you got external networks, so you let them VPN in, which is a managed interface, secure copy, which is a managed interface. You probably wouldn't let them select straight to the database or get on your network, straight SSH onto your network, right? You want them kind of going to a managed interface that you would control. So transmission, confidentiality, and integrity. Protect the confidentiality and integrity of transmitted information. This controls applies to both internal and external networks and all types of information system components from which information is transmitted. So most of the time, confidential integrity and is encryption. All right, you doing TLS, SSH, MD5, hash, and some form of, once again, keeping it confidential and integrity. Um, Using the one-way hash to make sure nobody's changed the file, right? So it would give you the hash of the file. So if somebody changed 1 byte, those hashes wouldn't match. So different ways to keep the integrity. Network disconnect, transmit network connections associated with communications at the end of a session or after 30 minutes of inactivity. The controls applies to internal or external networks. Terminate networks connections with specific communication sessions. So if somebody's on a connection, that'd be database, web server, app server. If it's inactive for 20 or 30 minutes, it just gets disconnected. They will have to get reconnected. So why would you disconnect them? If you keep having sessions, each session takes up about a memory. So if you get attacked and some people just start starting up sessions and you never kill them, those sessions will be out there forever, taking up memory. And once again, that could be sort of a denial of service attack. Once again, if you got any questions, cybersecurity or tech, just put them in the box. You see it right there. We're going to system and communication protection today. I appreciate that, Larry. Oh, my bad. Thanks for joining. Trust the past, provide a physical or logical trust communication path for between the users and trusted components. Permit users to invoke trusted communication path between the users and following security functions. So a lot of times, and we'll look at that, we're going to look at some architecture. There should be certain paths where you go from security function or user function. So if somebody tries to get to another path, either that's a bad guy or somebody trying to uh, elevate their privileges or something. So that's why you kind of want to have those paths figured out. So if somebody tries to deviate from those paths, 9 times out of 10, it's a bad guy or somebody's breaking protocols and procedures for you for those particular security tasks or business functions. So cryptographic key management. The agency must establish and manage cryptographic keys when cryptography is employed within the system. There's a NIST special publication 857 with recommendations for key management. Cryptographic key management established can be performed using manual automated mechanisms with supporting manual procedures. So how you manage your keys, once again, if you're using PGP or GPG, they got a certain way you need to handle your keys under under a privileged account in their root uh, directory of that particular users. Everybody knows I'm an AWS fan. Boy, they have KMS that you can handle their keys. Salute to Before the Billions. Thanks for joining me. So there's always different ways to keys. Then once again, they have security manager and parameter manager where you can handle keys and secrets, right? And once again, we're gonna look at a couple security checks in AWS and a couple security checks in Stigs at what you do on prem. So you can say, well, how am I know if I'm doing system and communication protection correctly? We have that checklist to say, okay, when you harden this is gonna roll up to SC5 or SC12 or SC, right? So those hardening checks in your technology rolls up to these security family checks that'll be in your policy, right? So that's where the policy meets the road of security architecture and actually hardening in your technology. SC13, cryptographic protection, determine cryptographical uses, Implement the following types of cryptography required by each specific use. The favorite one is your latest FIPS 140 validated encryption mechanisms. There's actually a website that shows you all the improved encryption. And if you're using for government, you got to make sure you're using, once again, FIPS 140 validated encryption. That means the government looked it up and says this implementation of DAS3 or AES 256 or 2048, you done it right. I see a lot of people saying, we're using AES 256 or 124. How do you know they programmed it right, right? There's specific algorithms and mathematical formulas. Just because say they're doing AES, that doesn't mean they're doing it properly, right? So that's why you got to get it validated. The bad thing about that validation is, as cool as validated, it costs like 100,000 to get that validated every 3 years. So of course, only big companies have it. SC15 collaborative computing devices prohibit remote activation of collaborative computing software, prohibit explicit indication of use of users physically present at the device. So once again, collaborative computing devices, shared type stuff, it's really prohibitive, and provide an explicit indication of use of users physically present at the device. So how do you do that, right? So a lot of times you can do fingerprint, voice print. A lot of times they talk about if you doing digital escorting, meaning I might have a vendor, they doing some configuration. So they take over my machine and I watch them, right? So that makes me know that they're physically present at the device because they're taking over my device and I'm making sure, once again, I'm watching what they're doing. So transmission and security privacy attributes. Security and private attributes can be explicitly or implicitly associated with the information contained in organizational systems or system components. Attributes are abstractions that represent basic properties or characteristics of an entity with respect to the protection of information. Right, so the entity could be a file. The attribute could you tag in the file saying it's high, medium, or low. Then two is, how do you make sure when you tag those attributes they're secure? So a lot of times, if we tag it, we know that that file needs to be encrypted and in transit and and at rest, and hopefully in memory. So a lot of times, those private attributes is when we tag something in there to talk about the file. Public key infrastructure certificates issue public key certificates under federal certificate authority, or obtain public key certificates from an approved service provider, including on the approved trust anchors and trust stores or certificates. So when you talk about federal certificates or approved vendors, that's GoDaddy, all the big vendors, Komodo, right? You don't want to generate keys. I see people generate their own keys trying to save money. Those aren't improved, right? So the reason those aren't improved is if you generate keys and goes to a browser, it'll never turn green because it's not from a replicable CA, right? Certificate authority. So when you do that, you upload in your browser, the check will turn green, and you know it's a valid CA. Mobile code, define acceptable and unacceptable mobile code. Authorize, monitor, control use of mobile code. You see the mobile code at the bottom: Java, JavaScript, ActiveX, PostScript, PDF, Shockwave. I don't think people do Shockwave. Flash is kind of outlawed, and VBScript is used a lot. So most of the times, how do we know if they're validated? We will sign them before we upload them. If we sign them, we know they're ours. So shout out to Big Cam. Got to go to lunch when it warms up. Appreciate you. So that's it, kind of working with the development teams, and we kind of need to talk about that. Get into some application security. Cam will tell you, working with development teams sometimes they don't want to play nice. So how do you go to stand-ups, get them checks, get them security checks, make sure they're done. If they're not done, how do you do a POAM, which is a schedule to fix it? How do you help them secure their code? give them secure, we used to call them widgets or sub programs that they can call, right? So what does that look like from security architect, GRC validating that architecture, and before the billions, that engineer, how does he use those modules? How does he make sure his code fits in one of those mobile code, right? Because the mobile code is going to give you the widgets, the counter, the pull down, all the cool stuff. But once again, how do you make sure it's valid? Me and B before the billions talk about, did he get this from three dudes in the garage from Deep Seek from China? We can't use that. Shout out to before the billions. But so where can we get our widgets? How do we validate and how do we sign them to make sure those are the ones we approved of? Once again, we're gonna dig probably in later and get into the application security. And from the application security, how does GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, make sure the app security is, once again, doing what it's supposed to do, doing widgets, doing peer review. Once again, how does that look in real life? Let's see. So that's all the ones. We just picked a few out. And I just got a couple slides, and I'll drop the link and see if anybody wants to come up. We got a few slides with some checks on to make sure how will we validate that we doing the system and communication protection family, right? From a GRC perspective, and really from a security perspective, what would that look like? So let's look at a few checks from them. This is an architectural diagram, and when we talk about putting together a federal package, be for the IRS or DOD, one of the things we're gonna have in there is an architectural diagram. What's in the architect? How does the traffic move? What components are up in there, and how do we validate those components? Right. So that's, and once again, that's, I say, a senior level role. Shout out to the senior people. So when you work with the security architect, work with before the billions, right? He's data engineer. He's working with the development team. I might say, B2B, I need an architectural diagram. He's putting his toe on AWS, getting these down. So we will have our edge location. You see our web application firewall in the front. Cloud front is our CDN. Then we have another application firewall looking at the OWASP top 10, denial of service, cross-site scripting, cross-site forgery, right? You see ECS, right? That's the container version of AWS. You see API, RDS, which is their database. You see the web tier, app tier, and database, standard 3-tier. You as a security architect and you as a GRC have to become comfortable when you look at these diagrams. Either you assess them, got to audit them, or have to secure them, or see all the above, right? So what would that look like? See what my man Herbert Wayne Warner, CISP, is talking about on LinkedIn. I got to do better with my LinkedIn people. Which apps to use to draw the diagram? I actually use the IRS has PowerPoints with servers and app servers on there. Most of the times, this one like this, I usually just pull this off the internet, to be honest, Herbert. A lot of the standard stuff is already drawn out there. So I just usually go out there and just say, I'm looking for a standard 3-tier. And I just say, for this one, I just said I need to see a WAF, 3-tier, and a database, right? So, but usually when I just do PowerPoint, once again, the IRS has their images that they use to do their diagram. So those are the ones I use, and I usually do mine in a PowerPoint. But for presentations like this, usually there's thousands of them on Google. So I just, once again, I usually do a 3-tier. Most people know I programmed for 10 years before I actually got into cybersecurity. Shout out to Big Cam. He started off programming too, so that's one of the ways. So all good. So let's look at, but once again, from a GRC, cybersecurity, and assessment, and we're going to talk about putting together an assessment package, right? Especially for NIST or FedRAMP or IRS Pub 1075. One of the things I'm going to have in there, because I'm going to ask for B2B, not B, or whoever's in charge of programming or working with the CTO or the application lead. Small companies, I work with CTOs. They're usually the application manager. So I ask for an architectural diagram. Then me as GRC, right? Then each one of those services, we're going to look up to make sure they're NIST compliant, they're FedRAMP compliant, they're state compliant, they're IRS compliant, right? So you see there the edge layer WAF, CloudFront application, standard load balancer, internet gateway, VPC endpoint, S3. So you as a GRC, and we're going to talk about that and start doing some labs. And part of their labs is taking a diagram like this and say, well, how would you do a risk assessment to make sure it was NIST, right? So once again, look up these services. Are they FedRAMP or NIST approved? Then two is coming on our next, what checks do we need to see on these different services to make sure they're secure? So this is some AWS checks I pulled from a NIST document. And you see at the top, ALB WAF enabled. We got our WAF in there. So what checks are we looking for our WAF? You see guidance there. So this is what I would give to B2B or their infrastructure team. Ensure the AWS WAF is enabled on Elastic Load Balancer to protect web application. A WAF has to protect your web application or APIs against common web exploits. These exploits may affect availability, compromise security, or consume excess resources within your organization. We talked about denial of services, OWASP top 10, different types of attack. That's what the WAF enabled is. And if we go back up, if you look at the top in the red, we have our edge layer WAF, then CloudFront, then there you see our application layer WAF. So we actually have two WAFs, web application firewall. We want to make sure we're locking it down and what checks do we need to make sure we're secure, right? So that's what you're talking about. When you're talking about doing assessment, if you're a security architect or me, what am I going to give to development teams to say, these are the checks I need you to do on your architecture, right? You give me architecture design, I'm going to give you these checks. See, denial of services. Amazon Guard Duty can help you detect potential security events by using threat intelligence feeds. This includes a list of malicious IPs, machine learning, and learning to identify unexpected, unauthorized malicious activity within your cloud environment. So you got your Guard Duty on, and inside your Guard Duty is going to look inside your Cloud Watch, which we didn't put in there. We have our CloudWatch service that will be getting logs. Then that Guard Duty will be looking through our logs for, once again, certain attacks and certain things happening. So once again, so let's look at a few more checks, what that will look like. If we had DynamoDB throughput limit to CHAT, enable this rule to ensure that provisions throughput capacities to check in your Amazon DynamoDB. So basically, once again, to make sure you give it enough resources to do its job, but not enough resources where if you got a denial of services, it won't keep going to your database because it knows that's too many calls for your particular system, right? You see there, you give it default 80. This actual parameter should reflect your organizational policy. So configure your account rights and threshold and percentage of how much throughput you want your DynamoDB. DynamoDB is just a database. Once again, I think it's on there. That RDS back there could be DynamoDB, Aurora, but that's one of the checks you would put on your RDS. VPCN and VPN tunnel. Redundant site-to-site VPNs can be implemented to achieve resilience. It uses two tunnels to help ensure connectivity in case one of your site-to-site VPN connections become unavailable, right? So you're going to set up two VPN tunnels connected to your VPC, once again, in case it's going down. Once again, from your availability check, right? It's the CIA triad, confidential, integrity, and availability, right? So these checks are going to make sure from a NIST perspective, your system is configured of what it should do. Then on top of that, you as a GRC assessor, what are you looking for, once again, in their setup to make sure it's NIST compliant? One of my favorite things, Stigs. I should have downloaded this. Is for Windows 2022. If you have on-prem or if you're installing Windows on your EC2 or your Azure, these are a couple checks from your Windows. You see it right there. It's a category 2 uh, check. Windows 2022 must implement protections. We saw that in there. TLS encrypted VPN or IPsec if the data owner has strict requirements for data integrity and confidentiality. We saw those. And 2 is the fixed text at the bottom. Configure protection methods such as TLS, encrypted VPN, or IPsec to make sure data transfer and the handling process. If you see down there in the yellow, SC, right, we was in the system confidentiality, that'd be -8, 2, right? So we talked about um, where the rubber meets the road. All right, so that's the security. Then we talked about up here, right? So SC8 is transmission and confidentiality. We talking about a Windows 2022 server. So you see it right there, SC8, transmission, confidential, and integrity. This STIG check helps it does that, right? Once again, we cutting on the TLS encryption for our VPN or IPsec between our systems or us connected from home, or IPsec is usually system to system, right? Once again, SC8. Once again, Windows Server setting the domain member, digitally encrypt secure channel data when possible, must be configured to enable. You see it right there. The fixed text is configure the policy, computer configuration to enable. The reason why I love the STIG checks is it tells you exactly what to set. You don't have to guess. So when you look at them, it's either going to be set or not. You're either going to be closed and implemented or open, and we need to figure out when we can fix it, right? So that's why I like to give the infrastructure team or the sysadmin guys, I give them these checks so they don't have to guess, right? So that's kind of what a senior person does. You should get comfortable in looking at these checks. A lot of times too is we can scan for these checks. We can use Rapid7, Nexus scans, uh, Qualsys is good, and also AWS Config has their scanners out there. So we're going to talk about doing those in some labs. So how do we scan the Windows 2022? And if it's not implemented, how do we set up a project to get those implemented? Shout out to Gilmore Morgans. Good afternoon. Shout out to Kenny. If you were younger looking for a job, how would you approach business? Let me say, hey brother, if you were younger looking for a job, how would you approach businesses? Your city without experience? I would go to one of the local groups. If you're kind of in a bigger city, they usually have um, Microsoft groups, Azure groups. I actually go to AWS group. They have a they have a IC Squared group here. Then I will meet people in those groups. I actually got 2 jobs doing that in those groups, especially for younger people. They want to help you. A lot of times when you go to those groups, they actually stand up and talk about job openings in the companies those people work for. When I go to the AWS group, it's usually 3 companies there saying we're hiring this type of job and this is how we're looking. A lot of times people present at those. Not out 99% of the time people present. You go to one of the presenters and say, hey, I'm getting started. I'm trying to do this, and people love to help you, especially at those events. Let me know if that makes sense. PBL getting a little tired, but yeah, I will go to some of the users groups. There's groups on LinkedIn I would join. Nothing works better in person. Like I said, I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's the capital of Indiana, and I try to go to 2 or 3 groups every month. Usually I just make it to the AWS because I'm old and grumpy, but that's what I would do. I would go to users. Then they have now you can go join them up online. Shout out to GRC Mafia, Chris Whitlock, study GRC, making it happen. No, you're correct. Those scan options could be kind of expensive. I'm actually looking at Qualsys. I think you can get a small scan for free. So I'm actually digging into that. They actually have a few open source scanners. I'm checking into that. I know SCAP is one for the Stigs. So I'm looking at some of the other ones, but you are right. Qualsys and Rapid 7 could be super expensive. We'll talk about that in the lab. What I usually do is a lot of times, if you're a mature company, you have a configuration management. Usually, all the VMs or Azures or configuration management, they're done off a gold image. So if I have 2022 image like we looking there, all these servers and EC2s are built off that image, right? So if they're all built off that image, I'm just gonna scan the one image because I know they're all built off of that, right? I can have I can have maybe three or four. I have one for my web server, one for my app server, one for my database. But if I got three or four images, I only need to scan those images, right? Because theoretically, the rest of them are created from that. So that's kind of one way I try to make it a little not as expensive, right? So you scanning maybe scanning four or five images instead of scanning for you know 200 or 300 EC2s and databases, right? Now, granted, you really want to at least once a month scan your whole infrastructure. That lets you know if a bad guy's out there or if somebody like the B2B put something in production and forgot to update the image, right? Sometimes you have stuff you got to fix in production, it's down, you don't have time to go through the process and the paperwork, right? So sometimes people slip stuff in production, right? So one thing you want to check it, check the vulnerability scan, check the compliance scan, then check what it could, what's your configuration management gold standard is. Let's see. Let's see what Xavier. He's lying. Let me see what this is. If you're near Big Sig, you're lucky. I'm from in the countryside. Thank goodness. Oh, which was separate. Xavier, but we know there's you correct. There's a lot of virtual, especially now with COVID. There was a lot of virtual AWS meetings you go through, virtual IC squared. So you could do it virtually, which is a little more harder, I think, to link. But that's what I would do, Xavier. If you shout out to the countryside, man. but all good, all good. And two, Kenny lets me know, my man, you see me, Chris Whitlock. We do study GRC. We usually talk about different things, helping people get jobs, looking at resumes. Shout out to Chris. They're excellent at that. PBO don't do that. But if you need some help, reach out to my man, Chris Whitlock. He's there. There's a lot of people in the YouTube world. But once again, if you're in GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, even in tech, that could definitely help you do that. Are the scanners subscription or per scan? I seen them both. I seen them both. I think you can do them both, Chris. I gotta double check that. You can do a subscription, but it's weird. It's per script. It's usually they're both. You get a subscription, but if you scan over a certain amount, you bump into another billing tier. But I actually get that information. I think Rapid 7 and Nexus, you buy it, but then if you scan over so many, you start bumping in different tiers. AWS, they're pretty good about that. They're pretty cheap per scan. But of course, if you get into, thousands of scans and it bumps up. Oh, that's enough. People gonna be live streaming 5 times. That's enough. Now, PBO trying to finish this course. PBO going back to one. So let's see. Let's look at that. Finish it up. Once again, though, you see that STIG check right there. Once again, SC8. I think I have one more check in there. Once again, I'll drop down the link if anybody wants to come up. No pressure. No pressure. PBO running out of gas. Let's see. So I think I had one more. Oh, that was it. So we had the STIG checks, 2 STIG checks, 2 AWS checks, 4 AWS checks. But once again, from policies, procedures, plans, right now we get to the technical side, right? So once you build your infrastructure from your infrastructure document, then we'll talk about data flow diagram, what data is flowing through these architecture. Where's your PII of your federal tax information or your HIPAA? where's that stored at? So we need to make sure we have that secure, right? And what's the flow of it? And two, how would you scan each one of these services to make sure they were NIST compliant? Once again, that's the system and communication protection family. So it's a lot in there, but that's why I want to look at these actual checks that went on the infrastructure that rolls up into these checks. A lot of people say, well, how do these policy checks actually roll down to your database or your networking or your web server or your app server, right? So those checks roll up into these policies and procedure checks, right? I always say the checks is where the rubber meets the road because nobody's ever hacked a policy, right? That's one of my big bosses used to say. Nobody's ever hacked a policy. So what would that look like? I hate out. If you want to come up, I hang out a little late, a little longer. The two is we looked at those checks, and once again is what would an assessment look like coming from that? If you said you're looking at a third party vendor, and they said this is our setup, and we're NIST 800-53. So what would you do as a GRC internal IT auditor, internal assessor, external assessor? What would you look like to verify this particular architecture? And it has a lot of standard things. The WAF, CloudFront. Most AWS thing has an S3 bucket. Your EC2. I thought that was ECS. I need glasses. Your EC2, which is basically your Windows or your Amazon Linux, operating system. Then since that's the web tier, that could be IIS or Apache. Application tier could be IIS or Tomcat if you're doing Java, or Apache if you're doing PHP. The RDS, which is usually a relational database, for that could be Oracle, Postgres. MySQL is usually what it is because it's the cheapest. Then you want to replicate that over, right? Because you have two different availability zones, right? So availability zone is in a data center. So if you're in Chicago, I think they got 5 availability zones. So if this data center goes down, it'll automatically roll over to this other availability zone too. And that replication database would take over from there because you copying it to it. But once that goes down, it'll make the RDS replica your live database. So once again, that will be your DR, disaster recovery piece on there, or your high availability, one or the other. Well, once again, what would that look like from a GRC assessment type connection? So once again, I'll hang out a little longer and see if anybody has any questions. Appreciate everybody joining me. Shout out to Chris, Mildred, Kenny. Shout out to Xavier. Ain't seen you in a minute. Glad you made it. Thank Kenny Guma. Thanks for my man Herbert from LinkedIn. I'm trying to do a little more on LinkedIn. Shout out to my man Before the Billions. Shout out to my man Big Cam. We work together. He let you know I do this stuff in real life. Shout out to Larry, Rondo Mondo, R Squared, my man Ty, Regime. We chopped it up. Ooh. So people looking for jobs, it's a tough job market. I wouldn't give up, especially if you're starting out. Um, I think it's gonna pick back up. Um, I think cybersecurity. I think we got a few gatekeepers out there that you got to get past, but they're always saying we 700,000 short in cybersecurity. So um, just keep grinding, keep working on your craft. There's once again a ton of people out there that'll help you. Ton of resources out there. Shout out to Chris. He's always putting out the free resources and top tier, which is a ton of them out there. Let's see. Even though I haven't watched one of these in a while, good stuff. Be learning a bunch of Python. Yeah, that's on my list. I think I'm gonna start doing a little more Python myself. So good. Life be lifing. Has working in the industry affect your has working in the industry affect your personal life from a GRC perspective? How's your personal business continuity program? Um, I'm kind of a recluse, so I don't know about my personal life. I'm old. I've been divorced for decades, so I just go hang out with the grandkids. They get tired of me, so um, I don't. For me, GRC enhances my personal life because I enjoy doing it. I enjoy helping the community. I enjoy studying. I'm finally getting this course together. I've been talking about for 3 years. So for me, it enhances my life because I have my one kid, right? So I don't. So yeah. So for me, it enhances my life. My personal continuity plan. Uh, Trying to get ready for retirement, get my little money up, invest a little bit. Hopefully take a few more trips. I had a rough couple years. I got laid off for a hot second, but then I kind of made my comeback. Then um, COVID kind of messed me up a little bit. I had some real estate I own, and people wasn't paying rent, so that put a little pressure on me. But it's all good. I'm kind of getting that back in line. But nah, for me, GRC kind of like I said enhances my life. As an old guy, that's what I do for enjoyment. Once again, I'm kind of a recluse, so then once again, I just kind of do my thing. Once again, I hang out a little longer, see if anybody has any more questions for me. Yeah, once again, I'm a recluse, so that kind of yeah, Python. 'Cause I'm getting back into my AWS. They use Python a lot for their scripting language. That's cool, for sure. I'm usually on Udemy. Every couple months, they usually do that $10. Usually do that $10.99 class. So I got a lot of stuff. I'm hoping to do a little more uh, Power BI and a little more scripting on using Azure, using Team, kind of using that. They actually have different modules, and then one of their modules from a team site is you can accept policies to receive data. You put a workflow to accept policies. That's one thing I want to build. So when I get my policies, I can shoot them to the person, the CIO or the CISO who's supposed to sign off on it. Have them Adobe sign it, date it, right, store it in a place. So when auditors like me come, they be in one SharePoint directory all locked up there. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. New called anti PBO environment. I'm trying to shut it down, man. Any specific certification you recommend? Um, I think Guillermo depends on what part of GRC you're trying to get into. Um, for me, the CGRC I think is popular. CISA, certified security auditor. Chris, does the CISA need 5 years? I think it needs 5 years though. I can't remember if the CISA needs five. I know the CISP needs 5 years. I think the CISA needs five. That which was the cat, blue team level one, I really like. Security plus is a must. Networking plus, because if you look at the diagram, you have to configure your networking in a VPC or whatever Azure calls it. So you need a basic understanding of networking. So I think off the top, those I would security plus, network plus, the CAP, which I think now is the CGRC, blue team level one, I think, and the Security Plus. I think those are the big ones. Yep, that's what I was thinking. See, the CISA, you need to look. I don't know how long you've been in the game, but you need 5 years of experience for the CISA. I only use Corsair because I get. Um, I will pick a cloud. What courses would I recommend dabbling in CGRC? I will pick a cloud, and both of them they will have their basic associate architecture in AWS, sysops. They have their security specialty, then whatever you want to specialize in. They have data engineering, AI, kind of whatever your track you want to do from a CGRC perspective. Because you could do infrastructure, CGRC, developer assessments, infrastructure assessment. Now they have AI assessment. So whatever kind of track you want to delve into, I would pull in there. But I would definitely pick a cloud. Then once again, the CISA and Security Plus. Then pick a cloud and pick what you want to specialize in the cloud in. Chime in on those questions people asking me. If people, if you want to add to it. A lot of times, y'all have excellent input. So y'all can add into there also. But once again, from that architecture, how would you assess it? Looking up each one of those services, and once again we're gonna start delving into that more. I think those are kind of some of the labs I'm gonna start, doing from that perspective. Because a lot of people say, well, how do you figure your scope of work? How do you figure out RMF, right? Your risk for doing this. How would you communicate what you're gonna what's your scope of work to management, right? So I appreciate you, Ron. So I think a lot of people struggle with that. What would that look like if somebody said, okay, you have to do an assessment on a particular department or team? How would you go about it from a development team, right? So one of the things you would ask for is your architectural diagram, right? So this is going to tell you the configuration, how they had to set it up. A lot of times it tells you what technology's on there. Then I would get a sheet up, be like, okay, what versions of those are you using, right? Are you Amazon EC2? Is that Amazon Linux 2, 1? You're going to switch over to ECS, which is Docker containers, EKS, Kubernetes. How are you setting those up? What databases are you using? From a networking, are those different subnets, or how's your communication from traffic from your different subnets? So what would that look like, and how would you start that off with a kickoff meeting? So some things we're going to talk about, and some things people ask me a lot. Shout out to Chris. Chris be at me in the Discord so I can go answer questions for people. I'm old half the time. I can't figure out where the question's at. Shout out to Chris. He be pointing me. I always call it back signal. So once again, I get questions like that. Okay. I got this team. I got to do assessment. How do I start? You need to start with an architecture diagram. Then the other part from the architectural diagram is data flow diagram. What data is flowing through which components, and where does it land in the RDS? Does it land in the S3 bucket? Flat files? Does it go in the RDS? Are you saving stuff on your Amazon Linux tools and your web server and app server before you write into the database? What's your retention before you delete it? Right. So those are some of the questions. Once again, you were asked from a risk assessment standpoint. I'll hang on for a couple more minutes if anybody have any questions. Once again, I appreciate everybody for joining me. Check me out in the Discord. I'm in Simply Cyber's Discord and Study GRC's Discord. Those are the two main ones. I'm usually floating out there in the web somewhere, multiple Discords, but those are the two I usually camp out in. Hope everybody have a great hump day tomorrow. I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. Late night with PBO. Once again, I'll probably get back to multiple times, but I'm trying to finish this course. So that's why I'm just going one day a week with late night with PBO. So once again, I appreciate everybody for joining me. Reach out to me, professorblackops@gmail.com is one, or a lot of times people just direct DM me in Discord, and I'll definitely get back to you. I'm an ex-professor, so you got to give me 48 hours to respond. I'm out. Once again, thanks for joining me late night with PBO. I'm out. Thank you so much. Oh, no problem. Just ping me if you need anything. Once again, I'm out. Everybody have a good night. Let's have a great hump day tomorrow.